Mayor, you may proceed.
Thank you, Max. It is Monday, September 20th, 2021. This is a joint meeting of the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission of the City of Rehoboth Beach. Out of an abundance of caution, because of the pandemic, this meeting is being conducted virtually with the anchor room in the Commissioners' room. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:04 p.m. And with that, I want to do roll call. What I would like you to do is when you say your name, also hold your hand up for a few seconds so that we can identify you. From the Planning Commission, Michael Bryan, Chair.
Mayor, I'm here, but I don't think I have a video connection yet.
Okay, I'm sure Max will be working on that. We can hear you loud and clear though, Mike, thank you. Barry Covington.
Here.
Jim Ellison is here. Julie Davis
Here.
is here. Michael Strange.
Here.
Thank you. Rachel Macha.
Here.
Thank you, Rachel. Stephen Kaufman. Thank you, Stephen. John Dewey. I don't
Mr.
see.
Dewey is not present,
I don't
Mayor.
see him on yet. And Nan Hunter.
Here.
That's 8 out of the 9 members. We have a quorum, so we can formally conduct business with the Planning Commission. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to call a roll call for the Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay. Thank you, Susan. Commissioner Ed Stronowski.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners, and therefore we too are formally able to conduct business. I'd also like to make note of those in attendance. Former Planning Commission Chair was an invitee, Jeff Trunzo. Are you here? Unmute yourself. We'll make note that Jeff is here. He's just not being heard. Also invited was Lee Weber, former Planning Commission member. Are you here? Oh, there you go. City Planner Tom West. Are you here? Not on yet. City Manager Sharon Lynn is here. Evan Miller, Project Manager's in the room. Lynn Cohen, Support Staff, Communication Specialist is here. Glenn Mandalis, I see you are on board in here. I see Debbie File, KCI, the city's current CDP consultant. We'll introduce others from Wallace Montgomery later in the meeting. And I'd also like to identify support staff with us. Ann Womack is here. Max Hamby and his IT staff, because it takes a good number of people to help bring these meetings about and pull them off. With that, I would like to welcome all those watching, whether you're live or recorded. I'd also like to welcome members of the public pre-registered to speak. And those members are Jan Conacy and also Rick Perry. We'll, of course, call on you at the appropriate time during the meeting. Excuse me. There are no support documents available for this meeting. And so I'd like to make note that the purpose of this special meeting is to discuss the Comprehensive Development Plan, also known as the CDP update, and the path forward. I'd like to share a few things. I would like to thank everybody for being able to attend today on such short notice. And I'd also like to just go over some rules of the road, if you were. This is a challenge. We may have up to 20 participants. Probably the easiest thing is for you to raise your hand electronically. If I fail to see that, raise your hand physically so that I can see you and wait to be called on. We're trying to minimize the overspeaking, obviously, and have an organized meeting. Wanted to share some notes that when I first contemplated scheduling this joint meeting, my intention was to broker an expedited release of some of the information for the CDP. Alas, it was not to be, and instead this meeting is to respond to some changes and is critical in understanding the path forward in completing the CDP update. Before we dive into the meeting, let me share some background information with you. Prior to the most recent meeting of the Planning Commission on September 10th, we were advised by Debbie File that she would be leaving her part-time role at KCI as a city's CDP consultant, effective leaving October 1st to devote her attention to her full-time job. On the call with me at that time were City Manager Sharon Lynn, current Planning Commission Chair Mike Bryan, former Planning Commission Chair Jeff Trunzo, City Planner Tom West, and Glenn Mandalis in his dual roles of City Solicitor and representing the Planning Commission. When we heard of Debbie's departure plans, the quote, CDP leadership team, unquote, that I just cited above, decided collectively that it was imperative to have a concrete transition plan in place prior to announcing Debbie's departure. Please know that my absolute priority, in fact, our absolute priority, was to be steadfast in the decision to have a smooth transition in order to keep on the tight schedule of CDP implementation by July 2022. I am very pleased to report that this has been realized as we move into contracting with a new firm and project manager that are more than capable of immediately taking the reins to step into the city's critical finalization of the CDP within the strict timeline as mandated by the state, and one that adheres to the original timelines and the scope established by the city and Debbie File. I'm confident that there will be no pause in this effort. I want to emphasize some of the criteria for the new CDP consultant for you to keep in mind. Experienced in developing CDPs in Delaware, ability to adhere to the original timelines and the project scope as established by the city and the current consultant. Most importantly, committing to the same end date, which means coming on board as early as is necessary, which ends up being immediately. And also the ability to accept us as a new client, very important. These criteria need to be and will be emphasized time and again during this meeting. I recognize there's a lot of frustration, including me and the commissioners and the planning commissioners and others, with the process of lack of seeing product at this point. But we are where we are, and we need to look forward with a positive outlook and not backward. And I hope we can keep that in mind. We've got to go forward. We have a mandated end date. So what I'd like to do is hear from Debbie File, our current CDP consultant, and then we'll hear from representatives of Wallace Montgomery who are willing and very able to step in and assist us in finalizing our CDP update. Again, finalizing the update in the time mandated by the state. I prefer to keep the questions to the end following the reports of Debbie and those at Wallace Montgomery, but we will certainly take questions. And at that point, I would also offer the Planning Commission chairs, Mike Bryan and Jeff Trunzo, the opportunity to talk, as well as any others as part of the CDP leadership team. With that, Debbie, I want to turn it over to you, please. Debbie, are you muted?
I apologize. I was trying to share my screen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Yes, ma'am.
All right. I'm going to go to my share screen. Can everybody see the presentation of the first slide?
Yes, go ahead, Debbie. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Mayor Mills and the leadership team that's worked over the past 2 weeks.
Able to join?
A couple items I want to go over. As you know, I've been the KCI project manager for years with the CDP transition. I moved a year ago and started part-time in January. And my last day is October 1st, as I have taken a full-time job for a year and worked 65 hours for this entire 2021 so far. So I do want to take just a quick moment to thank everybody that was very professional and the partnerships that have been gained and this transition of where we want to go next. Can you see the slide number 2 okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I'm going to keep going. So as KCI, we presented some transition options to the city as far as seeing what would be seamless and the best approach. We further pursued the option with the alternative consultant, and the transition goal, as the mayor alluded to, was to have a seamless scope. Schedule compliance is number 1. Knowledge of content and state requirements and experience with comprehensive plans. I do want to reiterate on the schedule compliance that there has been examples in the past, if the municipalities have not met the state criteria, their funding has been halted. And that could be municipal street aid, DNREC funding for all the resources for the police as well. So I do want to let you know that schedule is very important when we had a transition goal. So as far as the alternative consultant, this was one of the recommendations we had brought to the leadership team. There's on this team, one of the leaders is a former employee. She was actually on the original Cdp Consultant team member. And I've worked with her at one company, and she came with me to another company, and now she is a project manager for another firm. So she's very knowledgeable and experienced and helped with all the data collection for Rehoboth. She's also done multiple projects in Sussex County and Delaware with myself in the current company that I work for, and then in her new position as well. One of the other examples that we want to provide is there was a transition team. We ran into this situation in February, where when I went part-time, there was several plans that we were contracted to finish. And we actually recommended Wallace Montgomery for a transition team for the planned Georgetown comprehensive plan. And they received certification in July 2021. So this is a Sussex County municipality where they actually took over the project and completed it after our transition out. Their depth and availability of the local team is great. It's hard to be in Arizona and serve you and attend meetings or be available working full time. And their availability to start as soon as possible is very important. So we've held between that firm and myself, multiple proposal meetings to get the scope, the schedule, the content, to talk about where we are, items that need to be addressed, how the handoff can happen, sticking to the same scope and schedule. The schedule was determined and presented to the state. So that was in April when we got the extension. So we've turned over the scope, the schedule, and the partial contents to the consultant for consideration in making the transition as clear as possible. So I think less is probably better. I just wanted to say where we're at. I appreciate it. We worked this weekend to update some 2020 plans that we got from the city on Friday, which had to do with wastewater and stormwater. So we have some new data available that we got from the city on Friday. So we've included some of that as well. So I'm continuing to work until a decision is rendered or a new consultant comes in, effective to October 1st. So with that, I can turn that back over to Mayor Mills for introduction with Wallace Montgomery.
Debbie, go ahead and introduce
okay.
the folks at Wallace Montgomery, then we'll turn the podium over to them.
Sounds good. So what we have is I've got Ray Morbeck and Lauren Good from Wallace Montgomery. Ray, I'm going to let them get into their background and some of their qualifications and let them talk about their schedule and their scope as I feel comfortable in this firm. We've had other transitions that have been seamless. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ray or Lauren.
Thank you, Debbie. This is Ray, and pleased to meet everyone and to help out on this effort. We've put a small little PowerPoint together that Lauren's going to pull up now for us to share with you all, give you a little bit of our background as we do our introduction. So I'll let Lauren pull that up first.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, we're fine, Lauren.
Great, thank you.
I thought I'd start as we get into the real details of what's important for you is the schedule and moving forward with the efforts. And we're pleased to be helping Debbie, KCI. We've worked with them for several years on various projects and really see just as an extension of that effort moving forward to help with this transition. For those who aren't familiar with Wallace Montgomery, we're a multidiscipline planning and engineering firm. We've been around for over 45 years. We're just around 200 plus employees. And we have offices there in Dover and Newark as well. And been doing work in the state of Delaware for about 7 or 8 years now. If you go to the next slide. This just is a quick overview of our services from comprehensive land use planning. We do environmental planning, permitting, strong GIS services. We help with grant writing, administration, and just a full variety of mobility, transportation, and we also have a utility side with water, wastewater side of the firm. So we have a depth of resources and people to pull in depending on the elements that are needed as part of the plan here. And really a strong background working with the public. Who you see here is basically the core team that'll be working with you on this effort. Introducing myself, I'm Ray Morbeck. I'm the Vice President in charge of the planning office for Wallace Montgomery, working very closely with Lauren. You'll actually see me throughout this process, and I really help out with some of the sections, the public outreach efforts, as well as the overall quality assurance, quality control efforts. And you know, Mayor and others, a contact for you to reach out should there be any problems or issues moving forward, which you hope not, other than just coordination and pulling the pieces together. And Lauren, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great, thank you, Ray. My name is Lauren Good. As Ray mentioned, I'm the project manager for this project, assuming all goes well. And as Debbie mentioned, I began working with her 2 firms ago and have been with Wallace Montgomery now for just under 3 years, really leading the comprehensive planning efforts in conjunction with the team shown here. As Ray mentioned, the people that you see on the screen are the ones that will be working with us on this project, ranging from senior planners, junior planners, an environmental analyst and GIS analyst on those various pieces of the planning effort as needed. And then, as Ray mentioned, we do have an additional professional staff of about 200 people that we can draw on for any project needs.
Go to the next slide, Lauren. Just wanted to give you a quick little background, and then I'm really going to turn it over to Lauren to speak. She is your expert. She's the one you'll be seeing on the day-to-day basis and leading this effort. But just a little bit for your understanding of Wallace Montgomery. We've been doing planning work for a while in a variety of places. We're a mid-Atlantic firm, so some of the things you see here are Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland as part of the efforts. Currently, you know, have everything from downtown development district work experience to working with the DOT and transportation and planning issues. We actually hold one of the multimodal transportation and land use contracts with DelDOT as well, and working with them on those efforts within the state. And then if you go, we just wanted to touch base too quickly on a couple that we've helped out with. We wanted to re-highlight this one. This is the one that Debbie mentioned earlier. We actually just got helped the town of Georgetown get this adopted back in July with a lot of very positive comments on the document, how it was put together, and really cruised through the adoption process with really no major, really only minor comments. So we're really excited on that. And just some other recent, just that we have one other project we're showing here, and that is we're currently working with Queen Anne's County in Maryland, just across the line there, for their overall comprehensive plan update, which is a pretty large effort. And we have the draft together, getting ready for a public hearing on this one and moving it forward. So it just shows the depth And this gets into a lot more detail where this actually includes all the town's information wrapped up into one of the sections of this countywide plan. So just to emphasize our knowledge of the different pieces and elements that go along with it. If you go to the next slide. But really where we want to focus, we're more than willing to take questions after we talk about the approach, but we know your concern here is the transition moving forward and how we're going to go about doing that. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren now to talk through that approach, working with Debbie, and then and you all, and then we can get any Q&A that you may have from there.
Thank you again, Ray. To develop the scope of services that we proposed, this was really based on our understanding of the various project requirements, having worked with numerous municipalities within the state, both under and above that 2,000 level population, both here at Wallace and then previously with KCI, we're fully aware of all of those state requirements that are out there for comprehensive plans. We did have a few discussions, meetings of the remaining work related to Rehoboth's effort with between us. As Debbie mentioned, those conversations took place between us, and then we also had discussions with Mayor Mills and the city manager. And as Debbie mentioned, we are committed to sticking with the project schedule that KCI and the city established, which was most recently revised in September of this year. So making sure that we continue with that schedule and the broad scope that was developed already for this project, and making sure to hit those critical deadlines that have already been identified. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a few moments. As previously mentioned, a few years ago, I did start on this project, helping to develop the original scope schedule, do some data collection and some initial drafting of the narrative, mapping efforts, et cetera. So I do have that familiarity with the project itself, which will enable a smooth transition from KCI to Wallace Montgomery, and really that background information. So that lets us really hit the ground running and not have to take too much time to review the documents or to learn more about the city before really getting underway. So with that, and a lot of this information should be recognizable to you all, because it's something that has been shown many times. We're using the same phasing and task items, tweaking a little bit for some of our more internal business operations. But really the first phase where we would be getting involved is to work to finalize that project schedule and really identify the meeting dates moving forward for the remainder of the project. Once the documents from KCI are transitioned, we would do a more thorough review of them and identify areas needed where there's still some material needed or things like that, incorporating recommendations that Debbie and KCI have provided on areas where additional input may be needed. And then our first real deliverable would be to provide that complete draft for the Planning Commission's internal review, and then make sure that there's sufficient time for that, and then holding a meeting with the Planning Commission after we've received those comments and compiled them to have an overview discussion with them and how they might be incorporated into the draft itself. After that meeting and after those comments have been incorporated, we would then submit the draft to the to the Board of Commissioners and various city committees for their review. And of course, meanwhile, having staff look at this as well, where we can then obtain that additional input and catalog that, and then have our second meeting with the Planning Commission to really review those comments. And then a third meeting would be our first planned joint meeting with the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners, where we work through any conflicts that may arise from the Planning Commission's review, Board of Commissioners, committees, and staff, identify what those may be, and make sure that we reach as much of a consensus as possible for what is to be incorporated as we move into our third draft round, which is where we are working to develop that draft, which would be released for public review. That leads us into our phase 2, which is the external review and input. So this is where we would hold our second joint meeting and provide a presentation on the overall draft. And this would also serve as the really the start of the official public comment period. Along with this, we would develop an application for the state's plus process and submit that to the Office of State Planning Coordination, as well as to Sussex County and the adjacent towns, Dewey Beach and Henlopen and Acres, as well as releasing this draft to the public overall. Later that month, we would attend the Plus meeting, which is a meeting of various state agencies who provide comments on many land use issues throughout the state. And then we would work to compile all of the comments from the state, county, towns, and the public, compile all of those, review them, and provide some initial recommendations for the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners considerations on how to address any comments that are received. We wanted to make sure that we were allowing enough time to appropriately address any recommendations, which is why you see that shown as 2 joint meetings to make sure that we are reviewing those as well as providing recommendations. And then along with those, we would be incorporating any recommendations that come out of that meeting into our overall plan to move forward. And then at that point, we move into phase 3, which is the state certification and city adoption process. So here, based on the recommendations that came out of that official public comment period, we would update the draft and get that ready for submittal back to the state. And along with that, provide a comment response to the plus agencies so that they know how the city has addressed any comments that they may have submitted, as well as how we are responding to any comments from the county and the adjacent towns. At that point, after we hear back from the state, and assuming that we've met any required comments, they would issue a letter back saying that we have met the adoption requirements and can move forward with adoption of that draft plan, which is what we have identified as our 6th joint meeting there. And that would lead us into compiling that final draft, which is really just incorporating the approval letters from the former draft, updating any dates, so that adoption meeting date, things like that, and incorporating that with the certification letter from the governor and items like that. And then once we do receive that notification, we would then notifying the county and neighboring communities that the plan has been adopted and has received certification. And then really we wrap this all up by just packaging all of our various deliverables together so that the city can have a complete project package for their records. So here we broke the schedule out, and again, these should look very familiar to you. These task steps are very similar to what KCI has already presented. So our first task here is really to develop that first draft plan and to release that internal draft for the Planning Commission's review. Now, we do want to note that one of our first tasks does involve formalizing this full meeting schedule with the CDP leadership team that was already mentioned, but we did want to highlight that assuming that we are able to finalize a contract and get the existing materials from KCI, get those as soon as possible, that it is our anticipation that we would be able to release that draft for the Planning Commission on Monday, October 11th, and then give a full 2 weeks to the Planning Commission to review that document, develop any comments, and then return those to us. Again, this schedule really just highlights the more general when we are anticipating various timings during various months, and this will be formalized more so once we are under contract and have a better idea of those particular dates and have discussions with the city about when we could work to schedule special meetings and that type of information. I know that some of the key items that we are definitely committed to meeting are, and again, we want to reiterate that this schedule does really depend on when we are able to officially begin the work on the project. But assuming that takes place quickly, it is our intention to be able to develop and get the public release draft ready so that it can be released to the public, and we can also submit it to the state on January 3rd, which that is the first working day of the month of January, which would then allow us to meet with PLUS later on in January and keep the schedule moving forward as outlined here. And then all of those various components together would lead us to our third phase, and again with the city's current deadlines with the state, it is our full intention at this point that we would have the document ready and adopted, meeting the state's schedule. Right now, we have that identified as here towards the beginning of July timeframe, but with the understanding that it needs to be adopted by the end of July 2022 to meet those certification requirements. And with that, we just wanted to give those highlights, that overview, and make sure that that we are completely letting you know that we are committed to meeting those very high-level deadlines, and then more of the specifics will be worked out with the leadership team. And I know that Debbie, Ray, and I are available if you have any specific questions. We'd be more than happy to address them or go into more detail of any of these components that you may want us to.
Thank you, Lauren. This is Mayor Mills. We appreciate you being here and giving this presentation on, especially on such short notice. I would like to clarify a couple things. One is in your presentation, you mentioned one of the things Wallace Montgomery would do is in the near future is refine the schedule with the leadership team. I want to make sure everybody knows that when I have referenced the CDP leadership team, I have been referencing a CDP transition leadership team. So when you refer to a leadership team, that goes back into the hands of the planning commission. The mayor steps out, as does the city manager, et cetera. And that would be a task with involvement by the planning commission only. I want to again make a statement here that in my view, we all have an extraordinary CDP transition leadership team. There's 7 that I cited earlier: city manager, 2 planning commission members, city planner, the mayor, the city solicitor. I think I got them all. And all 7 of us made decisions, not any one individual made any one decisions, and we believe we did what's right. I'm proud of them. I hope that all can respect their efforts in creating a smooth transition. This transition leadership team, committed their time on an expedited basis to develop a transition plan and accomplish this at lightning speed in about a week, and including seeking and finding a capable and available new CDP consultant to again complete the task and the timeline established, ending by the end of July 2022. None of us expected this change, and it's frustrating for all of us. I ask you all to step up and be positive and make this work. We don't have any choice. There is no alternative. We're planning to sign, the city manager is planning to execute the contract tomorrow with Wallace Montgomery. There is no wiggle room. If we don't sign that contract tomorrow, then they're out, and we can't guarantee deadlines. It's not going to happen. There is no possibility in my mind, and I think the transition leadership's mind, that we're going to be able to accomplish this and get the CDP done in the mandated time committed to in front of the state. So I would like to turn it over to questions, and when any of the transition leadership team wants to chime in, please let me know and take questions. Again, try to use your electronic hand raiser thing so I can best call on you. Thank you. Anybody? Rachel Macha. Yes, Planning Commission member Rachel, go ahead.
I just really want to make a comment. I'm happy to hear about this path forward. I really appreciate the update. I'm certainly on board, and I know the Planning Commission members are as well, I'm sure, to work through this tight but at least articulated schedule. So I'm excited.
Thank you, Rachel. Anybody else? I don't see any hands raised. There's a physical hand raised. Commissioner Sharp, and then Steve Kaufman. Commissioner Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my raised hand is not working electronically, but at any rate, I have a couple of questions to try to level set exactly where we are at this juncture. I would like to understand exactly what are we starting with? And what I mean by that, maybe someone could help me understand what percentage of the CDP is actually finished at this time?
Debbie, you might be best to offer that, Lauren.
Oh, and I'm sorry, before you answer, I did want to acknowledge that Commissioner Gay, as recently as last Friday, asked that before we had this meeting, could we please have a copy of the table of contents? And I note that we did not receive that, which is one of the things that has prompted me to ask these specific questions.
Sure. Debbie?
Yes, I went over, can you hear me okay? I went over chapter by chapter with the consultant, some areas that still need to be improved upon, and other areas that are 90-95%. The table of contents were in a previous presentation with the Planning Commission, but I can send that to anybody that wants that at any time, as we've divulged that a couple times. But we went through chapter by chapter, and there's some areas that are going to need more improvement. I would say we're probably handing a couple chapters to them that needs 60%, or we're at 60% with some of them, and several of them with 90%. So with receiving some recent data from the state and recent data from the city, we've been working to get those as high as we can, but we gave the Wallace Montgomery draft chapters of a couple of items and then talked about items that they would need to step up where they're very comfortable, they're very strong in transportation, environmental, et cetera. So we've gone through percentages of each chapter. And then once you have the chapter percentage, you have to take it all together again. So they'll be able to do that in a quick amount of time with what we're handing them over.
Thank you, Debbie. Commissioner Sharp still has, I think, some more questions, and then Steve Kaufman and Ann Hunter. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm going to hold for a minute. Let me digest this very interesting response to my original questions and turn it over to Commissioner Kaufman.
Planning Commission member Steve Kaufman,
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're muted, Stephen.
Am I unmuted
Now you're good.
now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank the transition team for doing this really quick turnaround. And I want to thank Wallace Montgomery for this new schedule. I'd like to get two things, certainly the table of contents and this new timeline that was just shown to us. I'd like to get that physically. I have a request, and that is in between these releases, release 1, 2, et cetera, I don't see any reason why we can't get whatever the current draft in the various sections is for us to be able to look at prior to the actual full release of the comprehensive draft. I've been involved in hundreds of master plans. I've never seen one where we haven't seen developed content, be able to comment to see if we could just, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. We've been able to see some of the content, even though it's not finished, it helps us to be ready for the full draft when it's released. And we also can be able to perhaps have some feedback to the consultants. I came on the Planning Commission in January 2020, and the CDP process had already started in 2018. It's now a full year and 9 months later, and I've not, nor has any other member of the Planning Commission, seen one word of this draft. It's time for us to start to see as much of it as we can now, along with this new schedule, which I think is going to be very difficult to meet, although I think it's very ambitious and I'm very appreciative of it. So that's my request, that we see as much of it as we can in between the release of these full drafts. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Nan Hunter?
Yes, I'd like to just reiterate what Steve said and what I think Tony implied. I think it's essential that those of us who are on the Planning Commission, who have both the preliminary and in some sense the ultimate responsibility to produce this plan, see the actual drafts of text as of now. There has been, as Ms. File said, partial content has been turned over to the new consultants. And I welcome and appreciate the new consultants, and I very much appreciate the work done by the members of the Transitional Committee in managing to provide us with a way out of this time problem. But I would like to see, number one, the table of contents, number two, all of the partial content turned over to, that has just apparently been turned over to the new consultants, which I assume includes comments indicating, as Ms. File said, which chapters the prior consultant believes need, a certain amount of work. And then I would hope that we could build into this schedule some deadlines for, if necessary, intermediate reports. I mean, I have a feeling this is going to be a a bi-weekly kind of project that we're going to be engaged in order to meet these timelines. I mean, as of the last Planning Commission meeting, we were told that we on the Planning Commission would get a draft on October 1. Now, understandably, since it's being turned over, I don't object to this. The new date for us to get an initial draft is October 11th. You know, we're up against a wall here, and it's a very tough wall. And the problem is not that it will make us have to do more work. The problem is that we won't be able to absorb and integrate and analytically respond to the content in such a short period of time. So I think it's essential for the quality of the report for us to get as much content as possible, as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Nan. Rachel, go ahead.
So, Nan, you make a very good point, and I realize that you're new to the Planning Commission. There are quite a few documents that we worked through for a good 9 to 12 months that might be helpful for you to get up to speed while you're waiting for that draft to come. And Debbie, I know you have a couple presentations there that are fairly lengthy that you reviewed with us, but I think it would be really good if we could surface that information and send it to the Planning Commission, probably the new members there for sure, and perhaps even the Board of Commissioners, new members, and current folks if you haven't seen that documentation.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Anybody else? Commissioner Susan Gay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
First of all, I completely agree, and I'm so glad that both Steve and Nan spoke up about needing the materials because, you know, as a former member of the Planning Commission, I can tell you that would have been my view as well. They are the ones who need it, and they need all of the content ASAP. But going back to a question that Commissioner Sharp asked a minute ago about my question on Friday about the table of contents. Well, over the weekend, both out of frustration at probably not having the table of contents today, because I didn't think there was time to gather it, and out of education for myself as background to kind of remind myself of where we are in this project, I went digging. And I did find from a year or so ago a draft table of contents that was in one of the presentations. And it brought to mind actually one of my biggest concerns, and frankly, one that at this stage of the process, I think we can no longer ignore because of the time and the importance of finishing this project on time. And that is that the draft table of contents that I saw, and now granted, it may have changed over time. Again, this was one from a year and a half ago, did not include a chapter on the visions. And I recognize that in the list of state requirements, a separate chapter on visions, at least I didn't see, we were given a list when I was on the Planning Commission, is not strictly there. However, it has been an important part of our CDP since the first one was written in 1996. And in fact, it's the shortest chapter in the 2010 plan, but in many ways, it's the most important chapter. And it basically says that the process used to develop the CDP centers on the creation of visions. It also says that achieving the visions is the heart of the comprehensive development plan and the basis for the actions recommended to create the Rehoboth of the future. And then it details 4 visions. I think if we move forward on reviewing draft content, and we do not, that is the Planning Commission, and then secondarily us, the Planning Commission first, does not look at what the visions are, we're making a serious mistake that could cost us time that frankly we don't have right now. So I would like to whenever you all are starting to work on the content or wherever we are with getting this content to the Planning Commissions, I would ask that the visions be the first thing that gets completed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, thank you very much. Two things.
I can actually address that question if you want me to real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
The visions are placed in the introduction because we go through the history of all the CDP plans. They're in detail of how they've changed and evolved, and they're also in the implementation chapter. So out of all the plans I've seen in comprehensive plans, it's not necessarily its own chapter, but by state law, we have to put it in environmental. So we carried through your first CDP all the way through and how they've changed. And then in the executive or in the implementation, which is that chunk every year you use in the budget, it's stated in there as well. And they can be up for change and discussion as you read the content in the plan. So yes, they are part of the plan, just not its own chapter.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Debbie. I appreciate that. I guess what I'm saying is I think they
Don't
should
forget those.
the first part that we look at, and
Yes.
that each we meet jointly, that we should do those before we do anything else, is because that seems to be the way it's been done in the past. And frankly, our plan in the past has been held up. There was a document put out by University of Delaware about 10 years ago that called our CDP visionary. And I recognize that it has content that is over and above what the state mandates. And I guess, my goal would be to continue at that high level and to have a plan no less than what we've had before.
Thank you. Before we go to Commissioner Gossett, Mike Strange, would you put your paper up to the camera again real quick? So I don't know that everybody saw that, but
That's 2010s. Yeah.
all right. Thank you very much.
It was provided as part of the update as one of the aspects of it, as Debbie just indicated. So it's there, and by all means, it's exceedingly, exceedingly important.
Thank you. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm glad to know that we have a path forward in realizing our goals here, as it's a little less than 100 days until the plan is due, the deadline date. And question for Ms. Good, thank you very much for your presentation there. I'm just curious, what other projects are you currently responsible for?
Thank you. That's a great question. I am currently managing a few different projects, primarily comprehensive plans, but they're all in various stages of their development. So as Ray mentioned, we are getting ready to open the public comment period for the Queen Anne's County comprehensive plan. So the bulk of that work has already been completed. We're just getting ready for that presentation in October. And then we're also working on a comprehensive plan for a town up in Pennsylvania. Again, a lot of the material for that project has already been drafted, and we're further along in that process. In addition to that, we do have some other ongoing projects, a smaller task related to grant research, writing, and administration, and then some work with DelDOT that just restarted at the beginning of the state's fiscal year. So that will be ongoing throughout the remainder of the fiscal year. But we definitely work as a team to work on these various projects. So the work itself isn't left to any one person in particular. And then also in preparing our initial scope, identifying some of the timeframes for the schedule, talking with Debbie, some people internally from our side, and then with the mayor and city manager, we were able to look at what we call backlog to see where our various projects are, what stages they're in, what work we have coming up, and when. So looking at all of those projects and the various deadlines and timeframes for those to make sure that we are comfortable saying that we have time, we have both the capability as well as the time to commit to this project to give you the plan that you're really looking for.
And if I can add to that, the one thing I wanted to highlight there, that's part of my role as well, working with Lauren, is to, her commitment is to this moving forward. We wouldn't have taken it on if we didn't feel she had the availability and capability to be managing our team to do that. And some of the assignments and stuff with DelDOT and other things that she may have been working on, we will look to be shifting some of that away from her. She may be doing more of a review versus a lead in some of those things. just to make sure she has the time committed to move this effort forward.
Thank you very much. And to follow up on that, I guess to help us set expectations, it's 3 weeks until October 11th, which is the target date for the first draft of this material to the Planning Commission. Is it possible that you could prepare, it's not really an executive summary, but just some type of expectations that we can expect from this first draft of the Planning Commission? Is it all of the chapters? Is it only the table of contents? Is it the glossary? Just sort of help us understand what to expect from that first draft or the Planning Commission on the first draft of October 11th. And then to follow up on that, one of my other concerns is that, as my understanding is, that a lot of the survey data that was collected was all collected prior to the shutdown of COVID issues. And certainly our municipalities have changed dramatically after COVID. And with this, if you will, executive summary or expectations, would you be able to address how, in my opinion, this dated data will be taken and utilized for the current needs and current expectations coming forward in life during and after COVID? I think, responses to a public survey today are probably much different than they were 18 months, 24 months ago. So again, I'm not looking for an answer today, but just hopefully you can help us with expectations of how that material will be used or possibly updated in the new CDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Julie Davis.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on what Commissioner Gossett just said about the public input to date with respect to the CDP. As I understand it, it's limited to, as Commissioner Gossett pointed out, a survey that was conducted in the summer, during the spring and summer of 2019, which is on the city portal, and we all can read it. But I'm afraid, my suspicion is that it's very much out of date, not just because of our issues with COVID and shutting down and how things might proceed in the future once we return, if we ever do, to quote normal. But I think that if I understood the proposed schedule that Lauren put forward, we're not going to have much time or opportunity for any other public input. And I would hate to see this plan depend on the results of that survey, or depend in large part on the results of that survey, which is already over 2 years old, and the responses to which in many respects I suspect are very much out of date. The other comment I would have is to follow up on Commissioner Hunter's comments about seeing the work product that Debbie and her firm have produced to date. I think it's very important to see the base documents that our new consultants are getting, so we can compare, contrast, and anticipate what their additional work may be in terms of whether they're accepting, modifying, changing priorities, changing emphasis, whatever, in whatever we get, comparing whatever we get on October 11th to whatever has been prepared to date. And it is work product. I assume it belongs to the Planning Commission or the city. And I think it would be very helpful for all of us to have that information, review it, and then be better prepared to anticipate and evaluate what we get on October 11th.
I just would like to quickly clarify that is what I meant, that we on the Planning Commission receive immediately what has already been transferred to the new consultant. And then in addition, I understand we would receive something more polished on October 11th.
Thank you, Nan. Any other comments? Debbie, go ahead, Debbie.
Yes, the last Planning Commission meeting, just to bring everybody up to speed, we did go over the updates. While we do agree that the survey data is outdated because of the delay, there were workshops that were set up with state and county agencies that had to be canceled, or they were postponed and then once again canceled because of COVID. So, I think we feel the same way about the Planning Commission. This is not updated public information. However, it is updated factual information. We have updated the census information that was released in 2020 for the ASC or ACS. We have pulled studies, sewer, water, transportation, all from 2020. we have rewritten some of our chapters and updated them 2 and 3 times. So some of our stuff is even dated as August, the latest we got in 2021. So we went through the entire, updated the sections we could. We have areas that have to be updated, needing information. So what we were trying to do in this transition was the new consultants have 13 business days. 13 business days. And instead of KCI say, we'll turn over your documents and get them polished for you, the consultants have different ways of writing. So we wrote the entire land use section very, very strongly, knowing the stuff, the factual information, the information we got for the mixed use zoning district, et cetera, from the survey. We were very strong in the introduction. Interviews were conducted with the city and community organizations by the planning commission members. That is not outdated because we went to the websites of the organizations, and a lot of organizations haven't even had meetings or released newsletters and been able to keep their information up as well. So we've gone to SOLA website, we've gone to the Main Street website, we've pulled everything we can from their newsletters to update anything that we can. However, a lot of those organizations are also dealing with the pandemic results as well. But as far as the public input, we did reassure everybody that they would be able to come back and see the draft. And it's very much, it's so much easier for them to be able to redline or want to update information than to provide another interview or to provide another survey that could change the direction. So the survey is one component of the plan. The input on the draft is probably the strongest that we would anticipate, I would think the firm would, on public comments coming back. And as far as the transition with the leadership team, we did talk to them about our documents versus theirs. This is probably the most appropriate time to hand off rather than me stay till October and have a consultant inherit somebody else's work. We want to give them the bones, the structure, the call outs, the visions, the goals that we've already worked on with the commission. So we wanted to make sure those are plopped in there and for them to brand it. Everybody writes differently. Everybody puts chapters together differently and has different writing styles. So we wanted to give them as much meat as possible in this, and we're there for them to answer any kind of questions through October. But we really think you getting a cleaner draft from the consultant would be the way to go versus giving you multiple things. I'm up to suggestions from the leadership team, but our focus right now is to assist this transition for the next 13 days. And that's nights and weekends. So we're trying to work with Wallace Montgomery, which they're very skilled to be able to do, to get the draft to you as they stated by that October 11th deadline.
Thank you, Debbie. With that, we'll go to Planning Commission member Jim Ellison, and then I want to go to the public. Then I want to offer the opportunity to any of those on the transition leadership team to make comment if they like, and then we'll come back to the commissioners. Jim Ellison.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that all of you have heard some very eloquent statements by our planning commissioners. And I think it speaks to the real frustration that we have had over getting a lot of schedules and a lot of the sort of details of what we have and what we don't. Whereas I think most of us are literally, as Debbie just said, we're really mostly about seeing the pros, the values, our visions, our goals. That's what, at least to me, and I think to most of my colleagues on the Planning Commission, that's what this thing really is all about. And so I simply want to reiterate what I think most of our commissioners have said or requested, and that is that we get what we have right now, and we can review it with the understanding that changes will continue to be made. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. With that, I want to go to the members of the public. Jan Conacy, are you on board?
I'm here.
Oh, we hear you. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to start with, I'll follow up, Jim, by saying that, frankly, as I've watched this process and having been through 3 CDPs myself, I'm appalled that the Planning Commission has had nothing to deal with. As a taxpayer, and I'm wondering what we've paid for a product that no one has seen. Okay, so that's one thing that I'm very, very concerned about. Yes, we've had COVID, But there is still, I don't consider a survey getting public input. And when I looked at that schedule, the public input really was, what do I care what Dewey Beach thinks about Rehoboth's plan? I care about what I think about it and what the people who live in my neighborhood and live in my city of 1 square mile think about it. And as everyone here knows, people in Rehoboth have very strong feelings about their town and their government. And they haven't been asked, except in a survey where it's very difficult to tell, where you're self-selected, are you a resident? And many of us who live here know that people who live anywhere east of Route 1 think they're residents. So it's a self-selecting identifying survey that is outdated, that even though it might have some good portions in it, is not truly reflective of the people who actually live and work in Rehoboth Beach, the business owners in the city of Rehoboth Beach, and the people who own property and live and work here. So that's one thing. And I'm very, very concerned. And no one's been discussing how much money this cost, how much money we've paid Debbie's firm so far, and how much money we're going to pay Wallace Montgomery.
Jan,
so I'd like to know that.
Jan, can you help us out and tell us something positive on how to get from here to the end point?
Well, Stan, you know what? If more people in the Planning Commission had been involved in this process, maybe we'd be farther along. If more people had received material, maybe we'd be farther along. If the Title 22 of the state code leaves the CD process and the selection of the CDP consultants to the Planning Commission, and this transitional leadership team had less Planning Commission members, 2 of whom aren't even on the Planning Commission anymore. So that's another comment. But I'm really concerned when I looked at this schedule. I don't know anything about Wallace Montgomery. I mean, we just heard about it, when we signed into this meeting. But I looked at their schedule when Lauren presented it, and the public comment I see is at the very end, not at the beginning, not after the first draft, not after anything at all. We have nothing to look at and nothing to see until you get to the very end. And it's such a tight time frame. The very end doesn't really, give the people in Rehoboth much time to make really viable content. And I know that Patrick Gossett very well remembers all of the sessions that previous CDPs held, public sessions on weekends, on weeknights during the day, to get as much input as possible. And I haven't seen this at all. Granted, it was COVID. But we were out of COVID. We've been out of COVID. I would say virtually everybody in Rehoboth has been vaccinated, and we still haven't had any outreach to the public because we haven't had anything to show them. So that's what my point is. And I hope Wallace Montgomery listens to it. Frankly, I don't think the process followed in identifying another consultant was the process outlined in the state code. But I'm not a lawyer, so I'll leave that to others.
Thank you, Jan. Rick Perry, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Rick.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Debbie for the incredible job that she has done for the city and her really good working relationship with the Planning Commission. I think we would be in much worse shape today, given the problems that the city encountered with respect to certain land recording issues and the pandemic, than the city would be if Debbie had not been providing her guidance and support and expertise as we worked our way through this. And so I will take issue with the fact that Debbie did not do a good job with respect to providing the various chapters in unfinished form to the Planning Commission. That was a subject of great discussion among Debbie, Jeff Trunzo, and myself over the course of time. And Debbie had very valid reasons for not wanting to piecemeal out portions of the various chapters without being able to provide enough information and continuity among the chapters for people to understand how they fit together. I will say, however, that at this point in time, I would disagree that would be the right approach to take. And I do believe that at this point in time, because of the constraints, that what is available should be provided to the members of the Planning Commission so that they can get a jump start on understanding what is there and will be able to more efficiently complete the review when they receive the first draft on October 11th. So I would encourage Lauren and Ray to consider that and make those available to the members of the Planning Commission. Insofar as the survey is concerned, I don't believe that the passage of time in the least bit invalidates what the survey results showed the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. No other community, as I understand it, in Delaware ever even did such an outreach. And yes, maybe there are a few people who responded thinking that they were residents of the city of Rehoboth, and they may have been from Canal Point. But we took great efforts with those who were actually implementing the survey to mitigate any possibility of that happening. Insofar as the general comments and the general results of the survey, they are not invalidated by the pandemic. Yes, the pandemic has changed things dramatically for us, particularly as a resort community. The city has dealt with that. They have received incredible input from the public, from the businesses, and they have addressed that by allowing outdoor dining, outdoor retail sales, and I think that the Planning Commission is not ignorant about what the Board of Commissioners have done over the last 18 months in addressing those concerns and how they have impacted our city and will potentially impact our city in the future. And I would certainly hope that the Planning Commission is going to take those matters into consideration as they finalize their input on the comprehensive development plan. I'm very concerned about where the comprehensive development plan is going. I share the concerns that people have about timing. I certainly wish that we were farther ahead at this point. I think that when I became chair of the Planning Commission and when Jeff Trunzo succeeded me, that we had stepped up the pace on trying to move this forward. And unfortunately, there were some unexpected problems that arose. But I do believe that the foundational information is there. It's there in the surveys. It's there in the work that each and every one of the commissioners, at least while I was chair, each commissioner took an active role in going out and meeting with representatives in the community, the organizations, and provided their input back to the entire Planning Commission as input for the CDP. And so for anyone to suggest that over this period of time, despite the earlier delays in the beginning, that there has not been adequate outreach under the circumstances to the members and stakeholders of Rehoboth Beach is simply wrong. And it's unfair to level that criticism at the Planning Commission. The pandemic did severely set us back in terms of the additional outreach that we had intended. I don't think that's our fault, and I disagree that we've been out of the pandemic for a long enough period of time to have set up new meetings, new outreach, new expos. You're still meeting virtually today. And so I think that criticism is unfair. It is unfair to the current Planning Commission, and it's unfair to the current Board of Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. With that, I would like to next go to offer the opportunity to talk of the members of the CDP transition leadership team. You don't have to say anything if you don't want, but this is an opportunity before we go back to the commissioners. Sharon, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thanks everyone for being on the call today. I think it's very helpful. And Mr. Perry, in particular, who last spoke, I believe you were the second chair to go through the process here with Ms. File. She is now on her fourth chair of the Planning Commission. I vividly recall sitting down with Mr. Mellon in early 2018, getting up to speed and working on behalf of the Planning Commission with Chairman Mellon, then Chairman Mellon, to come up with a plan for the CDP and to move that forward as quickly as possible. Mr. Mellon was a strong advocate to get it going sooner than later. We did that, and in April of 2018, the Planning Commission interviewed two firms. One, and I just point out, because this is pertinent, at least to me, that in April of 2018, the Planning Commission met with Ms. Feel and also with Ms. Good, who was then still working for KCI. So, and then eventually they were selected to move that forward. And then I vividly recall in March of 2020, we had planned for a grand open public discussion in the convention center. We aborted that very quickly after the planning was just about complete, because we shut down City Hall and of course the convention center. So just, making mention of those, at least to me, when Ms. File decided that it was time for her, after 1 year, I should add, of taking on a new job, relocating almost across the country, and keeping her dedication to the city of Rehoboth Beach and in staying employed with KCI on a part-time basis. I think her role in this was a difficult process, but it was also one that was exemplary in holding this together. So I thank you, Debbie, and I thank Lauren for stepping up, and for your company and stepping up, because it was the city was in a bind, and we had to make quick decisions, and I couldn't think of any better person, Lauren, and you and your company, to move this forward so we can have the plan in place by June of next year. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Sharon. With that, Mike or Jeff, anything you want to say, or?
Mike Bryan.
Yes, sir.
I am the fourth chair, apparently, and I'm not sure if that's a dubious distinction. But I will say that I don't know how to unspill the milk at this point. I believe this. I think we have a very talented and very interested group who wants to work on this. I don't think we have time to go back and study the history of this. We are where we are. And so I leave to others any criticism they might have, but would just suggest really and ask that everybody get behind and help. Everybody assist. Let's do this thing and let's get this thing right. And I think we've got a good working group to do that.
Thank you very much, Mike. Jeff, you care to say anything?
Yeah, I'll just say this, following Mr. Bryan, a message of unity. we cannot rewrite the past. The frustration expressed by people is frustration that I felt all year, so I understand the pain. I also feel very strongly that Mr. Perry expressed eloquently how much work has been done and that the work is valid and that I do think it counts for something. And there is really no choice but to work together and finish it as best we can. Remember that there is a mid-cycle update that could get additional resources if people think that is a way to address some of these concerns. I would recommend that. And that this mapping thing consumed so much of my life in this past year, and it was the number one obstacle, and that's all I worked on, and I was really not able to influence it. So I don't want people to be left with the impression that we just flopped back on the sofa and did nothing. We worked on that continuously, and I think that is a direct result of lack of investments in this important function in past years. That really came to bear. It is not individual or group performance at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any more questions by any of the Planning Commission members of the Board of Commissioners? If not, we're going to conclude.
Mayor, I have something, and Mayor, you're barely able to be heard by me.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. I wanted to just compliment the response to the question that I asked to start this off, which was exactly where are we and what percentage has been finished. It ranged from 90 to 95% on some chapters, and some are at 60%. I think those are extremely high percentages. And I think that's very, very good to hear. And I completely agree with everybody that we have to move forward from where we are now. We can't change where we are. But Mayor, you've asked us all for understanding and patience. And I think I can be okay to deliver both of those with action. And where I'm still unclear is whether or not the requests from folks to have this 90 to 95% and 60% completion of chapters given to them, is that or is it not going to happen? I just need a clarification. I know we've talked about it, but exactly where did we land on that?
I mean, if necessary, I'll make a formal motion, but it doesn't seem
no.
appropriate
Look,
at a joint meeting. It's not really,
look, we don't even have them on
correct
board.
Parliamentary terms. But yes, I agree. I mean, let's get consensus or a decision on whether we're going to get these documents immediately, as I think most of us agree we want, or not.
Look, they haven't even gone on board yet. We're going to, I have no doubt they heard every word from you all, and that one of the biggest desires is to receive some of this information ASAP. But they have just taken this over, and I'm not willing to ask them.
Well, I understand they've just taken this over, and I don't intend to, sort of criticize or heap unreasonable burdens on them. But it seems to me that if they are the new people coming in, but we have a consultant who's been on board who has apparently transmitted content to them, and we can certainly ask that entity to transmit the same content to the members of the Planning Commission.
Right.
Commissioner Sharp, did you have a response?
No, that was my clarification. I was not implying that it should come from the new consultant. I am specifically asking and stating that since the taxpayers have paid for this with the current consultant, what is the barrier, if any, to giving the information to the Planning Commission, who I hear is asking for it?
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioner Jay Legree, please.
Wait a minute. I'm asking for an answer.
Oh.
This is a point of order with me. I'm not just going to say things and let it go off into the Ivory. I want an answer, or you will not get any patience from me or any understanding on this. So are they or are they not going to get from our current consultant the information that belongs to the city of Rehoboth Beach, or somebody educate me as to why they should not?
Mayor, if I may,
I cannot hear you, city manager.
Okay, Commissioner Sharp, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay. The contract with the new firm will be signed this evening and sent to them. And the new firm, Ms. Good, who has been working with Debbie File, will then put together what Debbie has put together, and Lauren knows that it's imperative that this information needs to come forward to the Planning Commission as soon as possible. I don't know when that is, but it certainly is. My hope would be within the next 2 weeks. And you have an October 11th date of when you will see that draft.
I want it before that.
Well, it's not what they're asking.
It's not what we're asking for.
And Lauren,
I'd like it right away. I don't understand. Once they have gotten the material, there's no reason why they can't transmit it to us. I realize it's not in perhaps the best form to be released, but we're able to look at these things and at least get an understanding of where we are. And I believe that's what Commissioner Sharp has been trying to get us to have. And it should be very soon. I don't see any reason whatsoever not to get it. Look.
Fine. Lauren and Debbie, can you chime in on that?
If we're being asked to give the chapters in a deliverable format to go to the Planning Commission, we would need some time to clean up the holes. We were trying to take that time and focus with Lauren over the next 13 business days. Lauren's working during the week. I'm working on the weekends. We're trying to get this in 13 days in its entirety to the Planning Commission. I would have to talk to Lauren offline with our contract and myself to say, can we release some chapters? So there's some low-hanging fruit that we can get out there now to get them started with, because what's going to happen is you're going to read something and then you're going to reread it, because they're going to put areas in where we have holes. They're going to pull additional information. So we would like to focus our time that we have left, which I only have 40 hours left. So we have time left on the project to get this draft going. So I understand the frustration, and I am frustrated because the focus was on mapping. For those that are new, I would like to reiterate, we had at least 10 months worth of mapping work to be done. And the lawyer is very familiar with this, as well as the Planning Commission members that were there. So we actually had to focus on that and work with the county on a weekly basis. So what I'm asking for is for us to get with, Laura and I have done 2 chapters that we've talked about in detail. We have 10 more that I'd like to go through and release them with her. So we're just asking for the patience to get the draft document. I can talk to her offline and to see what her schedule is like and my schedule is like to get intermediate drafts. That's what I can offer publicly right now.
Can I just ask, what are the 2 chapters that you consider to be done in detail already?
So we have, out of the chapters, the introduction, they're working on transportation, environmental protection. We have infrastructure is just about done. Land use is just about done. And then implementation gets saved to the last. So I gave Wallace Montgomery a table of contents, which I realize people in here do not have, but we presented that, so I'll get that to you again. And I could put percentages next to it, but they take it and they might massage it and redo the chapters in different meaning, in different areas for their branding. So
I understand that. And I would propose that this be considered to be work product and therefore confidential. Yeah. That is not for public release, but just identify the introduction as being a place earlier in response to Commissioner Gay, where you incorporate some of the visions provisions, which I agree with Commissioner Gay was critical to the 2010 plan, And all of the chapters that you just identified in addition to the table of contents. Again, I would propose, and if necessary, maybe we could take a straw vote of just the members of the Planning Commission here, that those simply be sent to us with the understanding that they will be changed, and that we're not in the business here of trying to figure out intellectual property issues. We are in the business of trying to adopt eventually the best comprehensive development plan that we can. And these are extraordinary circumstances. We're up against a wall. It might not be the best practices ordinarily to send out something that's not 100% done, but this is not an ordinary situation. And so for those chapters, I would request and move that other planning commissioners agree that on a confidential basis, those chapters be sent to the members of the Planning Commission immediately.
Nan, respectfully, you jumped in front of Commissioner LeGree and then Commissioner Ed. If we could go to them and then we'll come back to you if you want to do some further conversation. Commissioner J. LeGree, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunter. You were saying things that I was thinking. From the numbers that I can see published, and the city manager can correct me because she might well have made payments that I don't know about. I count $86,000 in the budget numbers that have been released. And number two, I would like to ask Ray and Lauren, how much, what part of the product have you actually seen with your own two eyes? Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
This is Lauren again.
Okay.
I can respond to the amount that we've seen. So Debbie and I did have a meeting where we walked through the schedule that we've built upon, and she also provided us with some early copies of the mapping that's been PDFs of the mapping that have been completed, just so we could see them, as well as drafts of the introduction, the community profile, and the land use. This was something that we had requested so that we could have a better understanding of where certain chapters, what their completeness was, and fully, having worked with Debbie, I know her work products and the level of efforts that she puts into various products is very well known and respected throughout the community. But it's for us to in part develop our scope. It's one thing to see 90% related to a chapter versus seeing the chapter itself. So that was the intent of our wanting to see those, and we did walk through several of the chapters in a virtual setting like this. We had some discussions about remaining work, etc. But from our standpoint, this was not necessarily a turning over of work product. This was helping us to better evaluate and understand the current level of completeness and help us when we were scoping the project. And Debbie was great in accommodating that request and sharing those with us. And she's also let us know that as soon as our contract moves forward and she is given the okay by the city, she'll be able to send those the remaining work products to us along with background materials for us to pick up and start working on.
Thank you, Lauren. Commissioner Chernowski, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Commissioner Sharp and Ms. Hunter articulated my thoughts
pretty well. I think one thing that's important when there's a transition or a change, to be able to see the difference in the work product, and for us to see what has currently been done and see how the language might change or how it may be massaged to reflect the branding of the new company. I think it's just important for us to see those differences. So like I said, they've articulated my thoughts pretty well.
Thank you. Commissioner Susan Gay.
Yeah, I just want to add something that I was thinking about while others were speaking. And we've been talking about the work product in terms of the draft contents. And I think Lauren may have just said in her last statement there, including that one of the things she's going to be getting from Debbie is all the background information. And then I was reminded, I guess when Rick spoke, that one of the things they did during the pandemic, in lieu of having workshops and public meetings, was to meet with, I think all of the planning commission were involved. They divided up into groups so that 2 or 3 of them were meeting with all the organizations around town. And I think it would be useful, certainly for the planning commissioners, not necessarily for us, but for every planning commissioner, because many of them were not here then, to have all of that background input information. So whatever KCI has used to write what they've written so far, all of that data input, but I don't mean data just in terms of numbers and data from the city. I mean all of this collective input from all these community organizations, that should be assembled somehow and also given to the planning commissioners, because that's obviously going to be very valuable public content that we won't get any other way. That's all.
Thank you, Susan. Nan, did you want to continue or you completed?
I don't have anything else to add, and I don't want to, beat a dead horse. I do want to move to a resolution, as Commissioner Sharp said. I mean, let's have an answer to this question. I mean, for the material that we've identified that has already been transmitted, I think we would like to have that transmitted to the Planning Commission, and a specific answer is to yes, not in 2 weeks, but as quickly as possible.
Debbie and Lauren, first, I would think Lauren needs to be comfortable with it, but can we not do that? Transfer some of the work product to the Planning Commission members, because it probably should not go to the Board of Commissioners yet, but it could go to the Planning Commission.
This is Lauren. I think that the question that I'm hearing asked is, will the drafts that KCI has worked on, can and will those be transmitted to the Planning Commission prior to Wallace Montgomery's anticipated release of that first Planning Commission draft on that October 11th date? As for that question, I can't really answer that at this. It is not our work product. We do not have it, so we cannot transmit. We can't transmit that. So I have to defer to Debbie on that specific comment. I know that once we do receive the materials, we are going to start working, and once we're able to take a more thorough look at everything, we'll have a better understanding ourselves of whether there may be, and I want to stress this, whether there might be chapters that can be accelerated that we've taken a look at, but I don't want to commit to anything along those lines without having seen that full range of information.
Lauren, if I can add, the one thing I think I'd like to say on that is, one, first off, I appreciate hearing the commissioners' comments, concerns, and items of concerns, because that really helps us as we're moving forward to understand your thoughts, what you're looking for, and hopefully making this as smooth as transition as we can. I would like to put out there, if it's fair to the commission, that as we get that information, as Lauren said, we can work to identify what we received, where we see there might be gaps, and look to be able to provide you an update on that much sooner than the 11th of providing a draft. And that way you see what we have and what's worth transmitting. We can't speak on Wallace's side what we can transmit yet until we see all the data. So like Lauren said, I defer that to Debbie, but we could look to give you an update as we get that on what we've received and where we see there's additional information still needed.
Thank you, Ray. We've got Julie Davis, Patrick Gossett, and Tim Bennett. Go ahead, Julie. You're muted, Julie.
I'd just like to make a couple points, particularly in response to what Commissioner Gay just said about obtaining the background material from all of the interviews and the efforts that the Planning Commission has made to date with respect to community groups, community leadership, whatever. I think that would be extremely important, particularly for new members, to have that by way of background and context, and to have it sooner rather than later. As to the work product, I'll be perfectly honest, I am baffled as to what the issue is here. That work product belongs to the city of Rehoboth Beach, if not the Planning Commission. It's been bought and paid for. It is in the hands of our current consultant. I agree that our new consultants don't have the right, much less the material, to disclose that. It's not their material. They didn't work on it. They didn't produce it. We're not asking Debbie to fill holes or to complete manuscripts or sections or whatever. Just give us what you have so that we can get started reviewing, understanding what's on the record so far, what you've done so far. It will be much easier for those of us who are going to have to tackle this in short order on a very compressed timeline to be able to understand exactly what the issues are. And frankly, as Commissioner Szymanowski said, and others have said, it will be very helpful to be able to see what your starting point was for our new consultants, what you started with, what you have added to it, how you've branded it. And these are all very important issues as far as I'm concerned. We don't have a lot of time. And I am, just as I say, baffled as to what the argument is here, what the hesitancy is here.
Thank you, Julie. Commissioner Gossett and then Commissioner Bennett. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, just quickly, and I think we're setting some false expectations. When I saw the presentation of the PowerPoint that October 11th, we would receive our first draft to the Planning Commission. To me, a first draft is a complete draft. You have all chapters finished. It's time for editing. You have 2 weeks to turn it around with your comments. I don't believe from this discussion that was just held that that's really, in fact, that's what is the product that's going to be sent out on the 11th. I could be wrong on that. But again, as I mentioned earlier, we have to establish some expectations, and giving the chance to Ms. Good and Mr. Morbeck to say what we received and what we can produce. But I think when you publish on a PowerPoint that the first draft of is going to the Planning Commission, people interpret that as a complete draft, and you have 2 weeks to turn it around. Again, I don't think that is what is going to happen. So I don't want to set false expectations by the new consultant to get to where we need to be. So I would hope, as again I mentioned, if they could even just a short executive summary of what we anticipate from the first draft. Is it 10 chapters and 9 of them are 60% complete, etc.? I just think that expectations need to be set for the Planning Commission, the mayor and commissioners, and more importantly, the citizens of Rehoboth Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Commissioner Tim Bennett?
Yes, this is frustrating, and I'm not going to reiterate what everybody else said, but this afternoon, the Planning Commission should get everything that's been completed to date by the current consultant. It has nothing to do with the new consultant. We've spent over $80,000 for work in the last 3 years. Nobody's seen a word of it, supposedly. They should get it this afternoon, end of discussion. I don't understand what we're arguing about this for or why there's no answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. With that, I'm going to direct Steve, you're raising.
Yeah, so just a second. This has nothing to do with what you're talking about. I'm asking our chair to send us the contact information of all the members of the Planning Commission. We've lost some, we've gained some. I think it would be very helpful for all of us to have the contact information of our fellow commissioners if he'll do that. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'll take care of that.
Thank you very much. With that, we're going to conclude. I'd like to direct the city manager to talk with Debbie and those from Wallace Montgomery to address your concerns about receiving information sooner than later. Thank you very much.
So Mayor, before you adjourn, if that's where you're going, am I jumping the gun or were you getting ready to adjourn?
Very soon, yes. Go ahead.
I just want to go on record that as of 3:46 p.m. today, which is September the 20th in this special meeting, we still do not have clarity on whether or not the information is going to be given ASAP to the Planning Commission. I just want that to be a clear statement, even after all of this discussion.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I want to thank the past chairs, David Mellon, Rick Perry, Jeff Trunzo, and current chair, Mike Bryan. I also want to thank Mike Strange for his visual accompaniments during this meeting. I want to thank Debbie File, who actually had a very big lead in developing the transition plan. Thank you, Debbie, for your time. And again, thank you, everybody, for your understanding, professionalism, and positive outlook. We're going to get through this, and we'll do our best to address your concerns. With that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 3:48 p.m. Thank you very much.